Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week, rather than doing a review or an update on things, I wanted to go back and reminisce on things. So, it's the new year for me as at time of recording, so this will debut a couple weeks later, but this seems like a pertinent time to talk about things, and especially given that my channel has, slowly gotten momentum. Obviously not like amazing viewership or anything like that, but, more people are discovering it. More people are either liking or disliking or whatever games that I'm playing or shows that I'm watching, or I'm discussing what I'm discussing. I've done these podcasts as a break from the gaming stuff, because in the gaming space, even though there are times where I can speak about things, I'll get distracted, or the fights will get tougher and I can't keep my thoughts going, or I have to just stop, or in the case of something like Apollo Justice and Phoenix Wright, I'm voice acting the entire thing and I'm not really getting a chance to talk. So I've used this channel as kind of the sounding board for a lot of the thoughts in more cohesive form, especially in that JRPG and anime space, because that is where I've set up shop, because this is what I do for fun. And I don't bullshit people when I'm not trying to say things like, oh my god, I just like these games for it. No, I've been liking these games and shows for 20, 30 years. Whether that's a badge of honor, whether that's a weird quirk, whether that's just the way I do things, I don't know. And it might seem weird to some people, because it's like, why don't you play whatever? Why don't you play Minecraft, Fortnite, Among Us, whatever the fuck? New thing, the shiny new toy that is out there. Nobody's ever asked that question, because on my bio, it says, I play JRPGs, I play visual novels, I play retro JRPG games, or retro Japanese games, and I watch anime. And again, I do other things, sports, I work for sports, I work at Lego, a lot of that other stuff. But again, I've made it pretty clear that I'm the type of person that does the 4 or 5 things, or the 5 or 10 things in my life, and I don't deviate. So for me, I've always kind of internalized working on these games for content purposes as an escape from work, and an expression of showing off games that I do think, even now, to an extent, are very niche. And yeah, you have the things like Pokemon and Zelda, if you call Zelda an RPG. I personally do. A lot of people would hate me for it. I don't care. But Pokemon and Zelda sell. Final Fantasy used to sell. Dragon Quest used to sell. They're doing alright, but they're not the big name games. They're not the games that everybody talks about. And I think there is something alien about it, and I've always tried to maintain the distance, because I'm not a Japanese person. I just like this stuff. I just like the culture. There is a difference. And Lee and I have discussed this, and I talked to her about it a week ago, about how to kind of internalize being a fan of something without it distracting from the bigger picture. Because my fandoms don't extend past what I talk about in the social circles, unless like people at work are already fans of these things. I'm not the type of person. I'm a very guarded person in general. I don't sound like it because I tend to goof off when I'm talking, but I don't, bust in a conversation with people unless there's something that I can latch on to. Is there a movie that just came out that I actually did watch? Because, based on watching YouTube or Twitch or whatever, maybe I haven't gotten around to it. Or, like the Marvel movies. Like Marvel movies I can kind of get into because that's the one franchise I stick with or whatever. Or maybe Sonic 3 or something. Like, hey, I wanted to go see it, but I haven't seen it yet. What do you think? Or, oh god, this sports team sucks. That shit. I don't blurt my fandoms of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy and whatever, because a lot of people just go, huh? I'm like, what gaming's like, when people say, oh, you're into Fortnite or whatever, there's a coworker is into Yakuza and stuff, or have played them, or they play Final Fantasy. It's like, yeah, that's cool. And again, that's where it ends. I don't try to make people like my stuff. And I think that extends to how I've talked about them in this. I'm knowledgeable about the games I play because I like them, and I want other people to as well. If you're experiencing something, or if you're not experiencing, like if you've seen it forever and you're looking for a new take, that's great. If you're looking for a hint or a way of beating a boss, that's great. If you just want to re-experience the story, maybe the way I project my voice and do things, whether it's bad or good, mostly bad, but I'm willing to accept, hey, sometimes I do it right. But mostly bad in the case of like some of the Apollo Justice characters. I mean, I was really happy with Professor Means until I heard my rendition actual in practice and execution. I'm like, this didn't come out right. This is bad. I'm willing to laugh at myself. But at the same time, I'm guarded enough to know that except for my family, not many people know that I do this, so I'm not going to go out of my way to do it. I'm not going to go up to somebody and say, check out my channel, check out this anime I just watched. There were a couple people that we would gab over and over, but that's at work. That's, talking to people. Unless I see somebody with like a Spy Family shirt, I'm not going to just, oh my god, blurt out that I'm an anime fan. So it begs the questions, like, where does that extend to? Where did I get into that? I don't have any shame about it. I just know that as a professional person, it's not right of me to just blurt everything out about myself unless I have nothing else to say. Because when I'm at work, I have to focus on my stuff. During a stream, during a video game session, during videos, like people kind of know what I'm into. That's what you're there for. You would expect something of that. So I bring that up because there is that dividing line of being a fan of something and getting too close to the sun and just not being reasonable, Because, again, you can be a fan of something and then be a fan of something, and it doesn't matter what. And there is that dividing line. Talking about a thing a lot can be healthy. It's cool. But talking about something too much or dividing something too much is going to be, you would think the amount of stuff that I do with Vocaloid on my Twitch stuff, you'd think I'd have like 20 or 30 posters on my wall. Okay, I kind of do. Do I mention that in public? No, because that is not the norm, but I also have Minnesota sports stuff on my wall. I have metal posters on my wall, that sort of thing. There is that dividing line of saying what is appropriate. And for gaming stuff and anime stuff, I still think there is this kind of alien thing to it, even though anime is a lot more mainstream and has been for, good 10, 20, 30 years now. It wasn't always that way. And the reality is, JRPGs, unless you're Pokemon, don't get talked about. People will talk about Pokemon Go and shit at work. That's what I consider the casual fan of something. Is like, oh, they're playing Fortnite. Oh, they're playing Minecraft. Oh, they're playing maybe Astrobot or something. I don't know. I don't know how well Astrobot sold. But again, newer game, cooler stuff. They're talking about Ubisoft games. They're talking about American games because that's where I live. That's what I do. So my sphere of influence probably doesn't extend to them. But I understand that that's not how I grew up. I grew up playing JRPGs and anime. And I know this preamble is kind of long, but I wanted to make that pretty clear and a delineation, just say up front, that I got into these things very early. so that is what I respected, and that is what I stuck with. I don't have an issue with other games. I just don't play them. I grew up playing these, and this is what I gravitated to, whether it was because the culture is different, the style and the visuals are different, the gameplay structure is different. And later on in life, it turned out to be a good thing because the turn-based stuff in most of the games I play doesn't force me to mess up my hands and my fingers too much. It ended up working out in my favor in a weird way. But that wasn't always the case. Back then, I was a 7-year-old kid. I was a 10-year-old boy. And I think my first experience, and of course I think JRPGs came first, anime came second, and then they kind of weaved and intersected at a point. When I was, it was probably 5 or 6 years old, I was playing Punch-Out!, Zelda, Mario, you name it, Sonic, all that stuff. I was doing it. But my first experience with a JRPG was Final Fantasy IV. And this was back when we had that stupid US versus Japan moniker, because most of the stuff hadn't been released, so it was the Final Fantasy II Easy type version. And I played, because I was bored. My brother was hanging out with a friend. I didn't have anything to do. I was just hanging out with him, and I played Baron up to the waterfall. And I didn't really think much of it, but I enjoyed what I did, because I was screwing around for half an hour figuring out what I was doing. Nothing doing. I wasn't a fan. I was just okay, this is kind of neat. And a couple years later, Final Fantasy 3/6 comes out, and if anybody knows me, they know I love me some Final Fantasy 6. But I came at it a weird spot. Final Fantasy 6 ended up showing up the Tower of Fanatics. Imagine your first experience with Final Fantasy 6 is not the opera scene, is not Kafka, blowing up the world. It's not the intro sequence. It's freaking the Tower of Fanatics, the most annoying and mind-numbing spot in the game. But it had a cool visual style for the time. It had, even with the dungeon design being just annoying, it was cool seeing these new monster types and sprites and things, and it was really freaking hard. And I was playing it, and I'm okay, this is kind of neat. This is cool. A few years go by, and my mom's, calling me. I'm just probably playing with some toys or something, wrestling toys or whatever, because I'd gotten into wrestling at that time too. So that's where the wrestling stuff comes in. Same time frame. It's whatever. So, I play stuff like Mega Man and whatever. I go into, I was a Super Nintendo kid, more so than a Sega kid, but I had both. But I was doing a lot of stuff. I wasn't really doing Phantasy Star at the time, but I was doing Mutant League Football, Kid Chameleon, Sonic, Toe Jam and Earl, Columns, that stuff. So I was still kind of into the, not really a JRPG person. And mom calls me, and she goes into my room or something. And she says, okay, as a present, this PlayStation thing's coming out, and I'm okay getting you and your brother a PlayStation if you play it a lot. Because at the time I had no concept of money. So she had us, swear that we would play it. And it was Kingsfield 2, which, again, I don't really know anything about, or Final Fantasy 7. And having not known anything about Final Fantasy 7, but knowing that I played the previous, 4 and 6, I was all right, give Final Fantasy 7 a chance. And my brother and I, every weekend would... Or every day after school, we would sit there and we would play Final Fantasy VII. It took us months. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we enjoyed it. We were kind of trading off the controller, or we were doing co-op at spots. And the coolest thing was we were enjoying everything about it. Looking back on it, knowing that it was kind of our first experience, really diving into a JRPG. And that's probably why for a good decade or so, it was my favorite. and it probably stirred me into getting the Strife moniker when I started doing message board stuff, because that's how it started. I was on GameFAQs or whatever, and I chose Strife 2 or something, and it was just like, okay, whatever, fine. And it just kind of stuck. I just haven't changed my name since. The Citizen stuff came like 2 decades later, but that's, digress. But the idea was, this was interesting. I had no knowledge of like Final Fantasy history other than the 2 games I played. I was just absorbed in the systems, but I'm still like 13 years old at the time. I don't know jack shit about this game. So it took us forever to do it. And again, we were still playing like Metal Gear Solid, Siphon Filter, not maybe GoldenEye. I played more like Zelda and stuff, because I think at the time I kind of knew that like my brother was I'll try everything, I'll watch everything, I'll do everything, whatever. I like the things I like, and I'm not going to change. But it still wasn't really direct yet. But Final Fantasy VIII came out, and we both played it. It was a weird thing where our memory card corrupted and we couldn't save. So we played all of disc 1 in like an 8-hour stretch or something like that. Died at the beginning of disc 2, unfortunately, and lost all of the data. But I played it a few years later and ended up beating it in a couple of weeks. But it was still one of those things. It's like, I knew what Final Fantasy was now, even though if I chose like one of the weirder spots to get into. But to be fair, a lot of people chose Final Fantasy VII as their intro. I just joined a few years later. And then Final Fantasy Anthology and Chronicles and whatever came out. So I got into 4 and 5 and 6. And 6 took over as that favorite. Final Fantasy X came out, and my friends, I wasn't with my brother this time, I was with my friends. And we started the intro, and I listened to the fact, because I was getting into metal at the time. I listened to Black Sabbath via my dad, and I had gotten into that. So I was like all jazzed up for this new Final Fantasy game. And I was like, okay, what the fuck is going on? And then you hear Otherworld, and you see the cutscene, right? You see the Blitzball game, and you see Sin blowing shit up. And we're just like, fuck, this is great, right? So not just Final Fantasy VI, but Final Fantasy X. And like, I think those two were kind of butting heads against my fandom of 7. And it was like, now it's like, okay, 10 and 6 and 7, or 10 and 6 and or 9. Because 9, my interest in 9 wasn't great at the time. But now it's made a lot more strides. And I think that's what people would think now that they've played 9. It's like, either they bounce right off it, or it's one of their favorites. It's kind of like, there's like no in between with that one. But those Final Fantasy games, then you had Chrono Cross, and then I was playing Metal Gear, and then you can kind of tell that with my retro leanings towards Mario and a little bit of Donkey Kong Country, Mega Man and stuff, that's why I still play those. I play them very badly, it turns out, but I still play them. But I was veering more towards Japanese games, and I wasn't really, we still had an N64 and a GameCube, but I wasn't really into Nintendo. I was veering more towards the PlayStation stuff. So when it became time for me to kind of buy my own stuff, I was starting to like either rent or buy the JRPG space. And I want to say the first couple of games I got. I remember getting a call from my brother, and he knew that I was still kind of dipping my toes into those games, but like those were the ones I was doing. Like Breath of Fire 3 had come out, Chrono Cross had come out for the PlayStation 1. There were a lot of games I missed, like Legaia, Dragoon, and whatnot. But Lunar and Suikoden, I wasn't like fully invested and knew everything, because it was like the internet at the time, and it's in its very very much infancy. We didn't know, other games had come out yet. But he happened upon, he threw a rumor out there of a game called Xenosaga. And I knew nothing about Xenogears, and to be honest, one day I'll get into Xenogears, and I'll just tell you up front, I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not really the biggest fan of Xenoblade, and I might get into it again someday, but those two games for different like Xenoblade and Xenogears, for different reasons bug me. But Xenosaga, at least the first one and the third one, not so much the second one. Xenosaga was the one where I was like, okay, this and Star Ocean 3. Because Star Ocean 3, looking back on it. But Castlevania had come out, so I was playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night and sticking into those and getting into those a little bit more. And, I ended up getting the DS afterwards, so I started playing, I mostly played the DS for the Castlevania games, because I missed a couple from the Game Boy Advance, right? But getting into Xenosaga, I was starting to understand, okay, this is the sort of game that I like. I was getting into this space opera stuff. I was a Star Trek, Next Generation fan, again, via my dad. So seeing this, crazy world, and the God stuff, the Christianity stuff, all the iconography is really goofy looking back on it, but the Xenosaga stuff, the gameplay was cool. It has some issues, but I was just invested in the characters. Shion was the perfect character, and the older I get, the more I resonate with her, even though I'm not really a full-time person, but I get exhausted at work and I'm pissed sometimes. And I'm like, oh my god, this lady's perfect. She take no prisoners, and it's kind of snarky, but also it's somebody just tell me I'm fired. She's like, I'm just so fired. Just little things the younger me was starting to just understand. And then Cosmos would bust through a wall and shoot things. I'm like, okay, you're fucking great. And then most of the other characters are pretty good. But it was okay, that first game, whatever ended up happening with that series, I was like, this first game was what I wanted. Because at the time, this is where the anime stuff comes in. Around 2000, 2001, I started watching Toonami. I was just randomly, putzing around Cartoon Network because I was watching, Nickelodeon, Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life. I wasn't really into SpongeBob. I was veering away from that because the older me, early 90s, was Ren and Stimpy, Real Monsters, Tick, Spider-Man, Aladdin, all that Disney stuff. Disney, Nickelodeon, boom. 2000 goes by, I happen upon Tenchi Muyo, of all things. And that was my first. That was my first anime, and I do not regret that being the first one, because it holds up so well as, you would, list some shows, and later on in life you think, do I really want to talk about this one? Elfen Lied. I do not want to talk about Elfen Lied. I liked it when I was 20. Yeah, 20, 18-ish, 20. No. But Tenchi Muyo at least has some things, despite its goofiness, that still hold up, and I do still like talking about it. So I was starting to get into that, and I just hit the iceberg. The first couple of shows with Tenchi in Tokyo was, but I was into it. Couple years go by, I stay up later, and I'm talking, Da Hack Sign. So Da Hack Sign comes out, so I obviously get into the games, the quadrilogy. They're not the best, but they're more of the, the anime tie-ins that are starting to tie themselves together, because a lot of the games I'm starting to play look like anime, and you can see where this is starting to snowball. Star Ocean 3, very anime-ish inspired. A lot of the voice actors and anime dubs and whatnot work these video games, and, things are starting to make sense. The visual stylings of a lot of these games are making sense. So, Da Hack Sign, Inuyasha, I liked it at the time, and I probably still would if I could get through the filler. I think people said the final act is good, though, because they do cut out filler. I still haven't gotten around to it. I gave up around 130 episodes. If anybody wonders, my tolerance for episode lengths and show lengths has not really changed. In fact, it's probably only gotten worse. Longest show I've ever seen was probably Inuyasha or Ranma or Case Closed. I've not watched One Piece. I've not watched Naruto. I've not, if you're anything over 50, fuck you. The most I could probably tolerate might be Brotherhood, but even then, I don't think I watched Brotherhood in full, because I'm just like, where was the first, where is the first? Where's the first series? You're 52 episodes. That's good. Anytime I try to watch anything over 40 now, I'm just like, And anyway, getting off track. So, Inuyasha comes out. Da Hat comes out. It's on Toonami. I'm starting to stay up more. A couple years go by. Again, my brother shows me this thing, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. And it was the good one. People like the old school, 80, 85-ish, 86-ish movie. I find it's just kind of basic and gory. Doesn't really do much for me. Again, the second movie doesn't do a whole lot either, but at least has a lot more meat on the bones and visual splendor. So Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust comes out, and then Netflix and YouTube start coming into the mix, and mostly the Netflix DVDs, because back then we had DVDs, right? Imagine that. So I'm able to watch stuff like Genkutsuo and Elfen Lied. Yes, I liked Elfen Lied back then. I don't so much anymore. But all these things, Hellsing, the original Hellsing, holds up okay. And then while that's going on, I'm searching anime on TV, like Hikai J's on like MTV2 on Saturday mornings. I'm staying up late to watch Lupin and Trigun and Cowboy Bebop. Oh, fucking crap, I love me some Bebop. Fooly Cooly. I did this thing where back then we had videotapes, right? We didn't have, we barely had DVDs, but I would sit there and I would tape any show that I really liked because I knew that they would be syndicated. So if I missed something, I would go back. I remember the first Bebop episode I watched was Wild Horses. So it was very late in the series, but it was something inviting. Like Trigun, I got into. I think it was the episode of him and Wolfwood on the ship, and then later on it was Hard Punter. So it was like varying spots. So I didn't get the full Trigun experience, but, that was happening. And then I was starting to filter in so many shows as they were coming in, whether they were 90s, they were 80s, or the more recent stuff, I was starting to get into those over and over and over. Like my fandoms for these games were starting to hit. The Castlevania stuff was coming back into play in, the DS era. I was playing Radiant Historia. Holy shit, Radiant Historia is good, and I wish we had a console version of that, because I would play the shit out of that. I'd have to get like a modded 3DS to do that, and I don't really want to do it. Dragon Quest VIII would come out in that 2003 to 2006 period, because I'm kind of filtering in that like 2000s era. There was a time I went to a community college, and I had this like weird ass break between classes, like 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 p.m. and I didn't know what the fuck to do because I was kind of left to my own devices. But I happened upon Winamp, of all things. I'm going back very far, but Love Hina, there was a channel with Love Hina on it, and again, I don't know if Love Hina holds up or not. I don't really like the dub version, but the sub version, like, I love the hell out of it. And it was kind of like Tenchi, but different, like a few years later, without all the spacey stuff. It was just the harem stuff and the goofiness, but it has some episodes that I enjoy. But, I would just spend time watching Love Hina, right? And I would just be watching it and watching it and watching it because it would kill time. And again, my fandom was starting to grow, and it was not the, oh my god, this is all I'm doing now for content purposes. It's, all I'm doing just for funsies. I'm growing into that. And then 2006, I've gotten through Xenosaga, and, Final Fantasy 12 kind of left me cold. And I've said that over and over. I'm not going to repeat it. But what I will say is a game franchise, 2006, 2007, whatever, got me introduced and has never let me down since. Persona. I got into Persona 3 via the FES version a few years later. I had just randomly picked it up. I think it was 2007, 2008. I forget which when it came out. But I got it on GameStop, put it in there, and holy shit. Those games have been my favorite since. Because what I've been expressing has been the dual interests in JRPGs and anime going on at the same time. They've been filtering into, like, I've been doing the sports and the working outs and the whatevers, and now, hey, I do this and whatever, but this is like, these are the things that I'm playing, these are the things I'm watching, these are the things I'm recording, and now I have this game specifically for, I think, where it feels like I'm playing an anime. And at the time, that's what I wanted. I was getting left out because I didn't think 12 felt like Final Fantasy anymore, and I still feel that way. I feel most of that way with 13, and 15 is better. But Persona, SMT, that anime leaning, very anime leaning, whether that's to everybody's cup of tea or not, it felt like playing an anime. Specifically because of the slice of life goofiness of it. King's Game, the omelet fucking, the omelet thing, the omelet contest, with Yukiko eating Reese's thing and just getting blasted on the floor. All the weirdness of the bosses, the engagement of the social links, because 3 had some good things going for it, and I like a lot of the characters, and I think Reload has definitely improved that tremendously, but still weak in some areas, mostly Tartarus. But Persona 3 and 4 stood up as, I like this franchise now. This is what I want. Because Yakuza wasn't really in the West at the time, or it was starting to get there, but not quite. It was still kind of subtitled, and I wasn't really, getting into it. But Persona was there. And then later on, SMT4, for the DS, 3DS, and stuff like that. Because it was weird, because the era was, it was good, but it wasn't great, because, like, a lot of the franchises migrated to the mobile platforms and stuff. So unless you were Final Fantasy, you didn't really get a foothold in the PS3. And it was weird because you had like Tales of Berseria, but the Tales games, I played like Fantasia once. I only started getting into the East games via Chronicles on the PSP or PS Vita, Memories of Salsetta, things are going on and all that stuff. So, we're starting to get into the 2000s, 2010s, and then we find out that fucking Castlevania can't get any traction because Konami's dumb and they won't let Igarashi keep making the games he wants. So we have to go a decade without more Castlevania games. So that's another avenue that gets fucked over, So we're losing games that are in my sphere of influence. Dragon Quest IX was cool, but it's DS only and very multiplayer focused. It's fine, but Dragon Quest X is a freaking mobile game, or it's an online game or something dumb. It was until 11 and it was like, oh, it's Final Fantasy, or it's Dragon Quest VIII, but better. It's everything I wanted, but it looks prettier. It has interesting characters. It has Sylvando, darling. That stuff. And that's like 5 years ago. And then Persona comes out, but then all of those things are starting to filter in. And by then you can kind of tell that thanks to Persona and thanks to my interest in anime, like the Netflix stuff, the VCR stuff goes away, but now I'm watching it on YouTube, or I'm watching stuff on Toonami still, or now I'm getting into Funimation, and everything is being streamed, because the streaming stuff is starting, and you can start to see modern day where, as I'm establishing who I am as a person in, my workspace and my work life, my fandoms for these have solidified. They solidified in about 2000, 2002, 2006 era, that early 2000s, only to get deeper and more ingrained. And everybody's different. Everybody's interest in something is different. You could have even more an interest in these things than I do. You may know every little minutia of every little thing, of every little game you've ever played. I am kind of like that with Persona 3 through 5. Not so much the first two. Other SMT games, I'm okay. And then Final Fantasy 4 through 10, right? I know my way around those. But, I don't I don't force fandoms, I don't think, and I think that's important. I think if you're interested in what I'm doing, that's more than I can ask for, because I got into this just kind of off the cuff, and it just ended up being like, what is my interest? Because if you don't have an interest in something, your quality dips, because it will show in your personality, it will show in your interest level for a product. Because at the end of the day, all of this stuff is product. All of this stuff is content. And JRPGs and anime are only as good as they're made to be by the people playing them and their interest level in them. And my interest in something may be different than yours. You know, your interest in Persona may be way higher than mine. I don't know. It may be nothing. You may never play Persona 5 or whatever. Or you might think that my hatred of Final Fantasy 12 is like the death of gaming culture, you know, because people did think that. They would think, oh my god, you're stupid. Why don't you like 12? I've said as much over and over. Why don't I like recent Final Fantasy games? Same idea. You know, my veering path to who I am started in 1990-ish, 1992-ish, solidified in mid-2000s, right? And I haven't really changed since. What has changed is the way that I've processed the information. Is, okay, when I work, I work. When I go home, okay, I can spend either an hour or 2 hours or 3 or more watching a game or playing a game or experiencing a game, or now I learn about a game via Reddit. You know, back then I would just play a game because it exists, you know, but every game is different. Every experience is different. And I think it's important for us as people to recognize that we are products of the things that we play, or the things that we watch, and the things that we consume on a daily basis. Some people, you know, like my brother or like my parents, can watch and do everything. I think I kind of got... The best way I would describe how I developed was my personality is very schedule focused, very structured, almost to the minutia. I got that from my mom. She worked really hard to raise us, and, you know, she worked tons and tons of hours at her job. You know, I got that mentality, that work mentality, that go-get-em attitude, that stuff. I would say my fandoms and cultural, you know, appropriation and interest in like metal and gaming and stuff, just how I would only do like the 5 or 10 things in my life, I got that from my dad, I think, because he's a Star Trek guy, he's a metal guy, he's a whatever, you know. My brother would watch everything and do everything and see everything and just randomly watch it, and that's fine. But I think it's important that people understand that if you do watch my stuff, or if you watch somebody else's, kind of pick up on what their mentality is, like little things they'll say or do, or what they'll talk about, because that is that is like ingrained in them. Me, I'm ingrained by sports and fitness, wrestling, JRPGs, anime, yoga, D&D, going to work, and other things like that. I am very open about those are the things that I do, and I'm not really into almost anything else. I don't watch that stuff on Twitch. I don't watch that stuff on YouTube. I know the things I like, and it works for me. Is that a little bit of a, you know, could I stand to be kicking and screaming Ned Flanders style into something else? Maybe. And slowly, that is a thing. But I think it says a lot about the things that I choose to play, or the things that I choose to talk about. You know, there is a reason for that. The anime that I tend to watch, they're not the Narutos, they're not the Chainsaw Mans, they're not the Jujutsu Kaisen, you know, however you say it, Demon Slayers, that stuff. It's more the dramatic stuff. It's more the comedic stuff. It's the Konosubas, it's the Triguns, it's the whatevers. You know, I'm not there to see pretty explosions. I'm there to see characters do things. And maybe that's the persona in me. Persona got me into characters. Give me the characters, much less the fighting stuff. Because you'll notice that in the JRPG stuff, I don't really care about the gameplay that much, provided I can play it. But if you give me a character, like, give me a Rydia every single time. Give me a Cecil every single time. Even if I didn't like it so much, give me a Cloud. Give me a Cloud. He's going through stuff. The gameplay is important, but I need the characters. And again, I think the JRPG stuff, the anime stuff works together because I care about, is the character doing something? I don't really care about, oh my god, it's looking fancy and shit. Because sometimes the fighting can only go so far. Sometimes the combat can only take you so far. Sometimes you need a good story and a good set of characters to make something of yourself. And I think that's important. And I do think that's really what resonates with me going forward is I'm looking for more of what I like, doing it in different ways, but understanding that if I'm going to improve, I do need to experience new things, but I don't want that to veer too far off the beaten path, because if I want something, I'm looking at a tin as a product and I'm saying, what am I getting as that product? Am I getting what I paid for? Because I'm paying a lot of money. If I'm playing a Mega Man game, I'm getting a Mega Man game. So I got Mega Man 11 a few years ago. Cool. That's cool. I played it. That's great. If I'm playing a Castlevania or a Bloodstained game, what do I want to play? Symphony of the Night. Give me that. Or if it's a Mario game, am I playing a Mario game? Cool. I want a Mario game. A Final Fantasy game should be a Final Fantasy game. A Persona game should be a Persona game. What does that mean? Well, it has some codifying interests. An anime kind of has that 3-episode rule. Once you get through that 3rd episode, you kind of know, okay, I see what this is. I see what they're going for. If they challenge me, like the Madoka Magica thing, I kind of get it. But everything is a product, both in the consumer sense and a personal sense. And I think I want to end on that. I want people to understand that whether it's me as a person or me as a creator, I am a product of the things that got me to this point. And I know that those have influenced me, for good or for bad. They have influenced me to do the things that I'm going to do going forward, because I'm probably, 20, 30, 40 more years to go? I don't know. But if I make any sort of statement, it's that I know who I am and I know what I like. And if people like that about me or don't like that about me, there's millions of other people on YouTube or Twitch that they can like. And I go back to something that Brian Zane from Wrestling with Regret said: like what you like, but don't be a dick. And that extends to reality too. In the same way, don't be a dick to people, about your fandoms. Don't be so in love with your thing that you think that's all it is. Because the reality of the situation is that this stuff is very niche. My fandoms do not extend to everybody else. So I'm smart enough to know that if I like something, okay, that's cool, but only in certain situations will I like it. So like what you like, but don't be a dick about it. But remember, don't be so effusive in your own praise or up your own ass. That's basically the other way of looking at it. Don't be so up in your own ass that you think everything you do means what you think it does, because that's where hubris sets in. That's where not having humility. I'm a self-deprecating guy. I honestly could stand to be a little more a little more confident in myself, and I have gotten that point. But I realize that the world doesn't revolve around me. I just have a place in it, and I'm trying to carve out my place in it. So I treat everybody straightforward as it is. So if you like what I bring to the YouTube space or the Twitch space, or if you like the things that I've talked about, that's great. But I'm just a guy. I hope that influences what you expect of me, because you kind of know this is the stuff that I do. I'm not a bullshit artist. I know that sounds crazy, but, it is what it is. Like, I've grown up this way. I don't regret it because this is how I've become who I am, for better or for worse. And, same thing extends to anyone listening to this. You are what you consume, in many ways. But make sure that you don't be a dick to people, but you also don't overwhelm people with your fandoms. So that's important. But anyway, I've talked on long enough, I think. I'm going to get my own workout in and get to work. So we did that, and it's kind of cool to get that stuff off my chest today. Next week is let's see, so at time of recording, I don't know when or how. I think I'm starting to get the anime for this season filtered in. I've already dumped one. It was like possibly the greatest alchemist in the world. I dumped that in like 5 minutes. So I'll talk about why I dumped it. But, shows are starting to filter in for this season, so we'll get to the winter anime discussion. As far as full-length episodes, we've got the Ys VIII Art of Exploration and Expression. Golden Void, that one will be nice and quick and stupid. I like that. And then Persona 5 Strikers. So those will be the full-length episodes. As far as Mega May, I still want to do like a Mega Man episode and a Mega Man X episode at least, but still have my anime reviews on the side. So that'll kind of take over for that May, but that's a few months from now. But that'll do for today. I apologize if my voice is a little nasally or a little crackly. It's really freaking cold, so my voice might have been affected. But I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.